Oh no! It's time to get this strung up. But before I do, I want to talk about these strings, Martin Silk and Steel, because there's been a lot of discussion in the comments about me using steel strings on this. Now I know that this was intended to be strung with gut strings, or maybe nylon, as they now are, classical strings. But I want to hear how this sounds with steel, because that's my preference as a player. Now on the website, Martin say that the tension in these is 122 pounds. I'm assuming it's pounds, they just say 122. And that's not far off classical strings. Classical strings seem to be in the 90s. I've seen them as low as 88 for the light tension ones, and they seem to go up to about the mid 90s. And that is lower tension than these, admittedly. But I will generally be playing this in open tunings, open D, open G, and I guess if I want to play it in standard, I could play in drop D, or rather standard detuned, i.e. all the strings detuned down, not just the bottom string. And that will reduce the tension considerably. Now bear with me, because I'm going to hit you with some mathematics here. The tension of a string is proportional to the frequency squared, as well as the length. But if everything's constant and we're just adjusting the tension of the string, the tension goes up with the square of the frequency of the note. In other words, if we tune it up an octave, if you dare, the frequency goes up 2 times, but the tension goes up 4 times. So there's a much bigger increase in tension, or equally a decrease in tension when you tune down. Now, a guitar is an example of equal temperament, in that the ratio of 2 adjacent notes is always the same as we go up the neck. Let me just explain this. To go from an open string up to double the frequency in 12 frets, we're multiplying by a constant ratio each time. And that ratio is the 12th root of 2. You with me? Which means that we multiply the frequency each time we fret a new note. So it's 12th root of 2, and then the 12th root of 2 squared, cubed, and so on, until eventually, multiplying all those ratios together, we get 2. I hope you're with me on this. 12th root of 2 is about 1.06, very slightly less, but it's about 6%. So we're adding 6% to the frequency every time we fret a new note, which means that fretting 2 notes is 6% squared, which is 12%. It's not 36%, okay? It's 1.06 times 1.06, which is about 1.12. You double the 0.06. I will explain that at the end of the video if anybody's interested. Go right to the end of the video and I'll give a quick explanation of it. It's a little bit of a mathematical shortcut. So the difference between an E and a D is 12%. 1.12 is the ratio between those two notes. When we square that, that percentage doubles again. In fact, it's a bit more. It's about 26%. So the ratio in the tensions between D and E is 1.26. With me so far? Which means that when we take our 122 for these strings, the total tension, and we detune them down a whole tone, 2 semitones, we get below 100, we're into the 90s. And that's directly comparable to the tension in classical strings. Okay? So putting these strings on this guitar, down tuned to D, is the same tension as a typical set of medium to high tension classical strings. Okay. Now, one more thing before I string this up. I just want to recap on what I've done to this guitar, because some of you will realise this is not cross-braced. That it's ladder braced. There's a brace here. There's a brace here. There's a brace behind the bridge here, and there's a brace here. In fact, yeah, that's it. There are 4 braces here, 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 and here. Now, there's no reason you shouldn't put a reasonable tension across a ladder braced guitar. You can buy modern steel string ladder braced guitars. Collings do one. I think it's their Waterloo series. But obviously a cross brace, shouldn't use the word obviously really, a cross brace is going to be inherently more able to withstand the tensions involved. But just because something is ladder braced doesn't necessarily make it weak. Now let's just have a think here about what's going to happen when I string this up. Let's look at the bridge first. Originally, the bridge on this tore off, and I think it tore off because somebody put modern steel strings on this guitar. And here I am about to put modern steel strings on this guitar, although as I've explained, they're not that much more tension than classical. The difference now, though, is there's a bridge plate underneath this bridge, and that makes a huge difference. We've got a whole area here which has been stiffened up considerably, and so it will spread the tension between the 2 braces behind and in front, whereas before there was very little to stop this bridge pulling up. And in fact, I suspect when ball end strings were put on this, as I believe happened, they would have been pulling on the bridge, not on the soundboard, because the soundboard had torn through. So the ball ends of the strings would have been sitting hard against the bridge and would have just twisted the bridge forward and just pulled it off the guitar. But now we've got a bridge plate, so the strings actually anchor to the bridge plate, not the bridge. There still will be a twisting moment on this bridge, and before I string it up I'm going to take this saddle down a little bit because it is a little bit high and I don't want to have too much of a moment. A moment is 2 forces shearing like that, pulling this bridge, twisting the bridge. I'm not going to take much off it, but it is a little high at the moment. I want to keep that twisting force to a minimum really, until I've got it all properly set up. So I'm not actually too much worried about what's going on at the bridge, because I think this is perfectly capable of taking the tension. There may be a little bit of bowing, but as long as the brace here is fairly secure and well glued, we should be okay. Because if you think about what's happening, the bridge is going to be being pulled this way. So it's going to be pulling up on the brace here. So there's a danger perhaps that the guitar, the soundboard could come away from the brace here. But it's going to be pushing down on this brace here. And because the brace is supported at the sides, I'm not too worried about that brace at all really. So there's perhaps a suspicion here that we might get trouble if the glue is weak in this brace, but we'll see. The bridge plate will spread out a lot of this tension, and so I'm not that concerned about what's happening with the bridge. More of concern is what's going on here. When I got this when I got this guitar, there was a crack all the way along here, and I don't think this was shrinkage. I suspect this was a mechanical problem. When we string this up, this neck is going to want to come up this way. It's going to almost be like a can opener, trying to do that on the guitar. And just as we had with the bridge pressing down here and up here, we're going to have this pulling up on this brace and pressing down on this brace. And in fact, we saw what had happened with the way the glue had gone on these 2 braces. This brace, the glue had gone on the on the outsides here, which I could believe could be because the whole of the top was pressed down, and so the brace was forced away at the ends because we're just pressing down in the middle. And the glue had gone in the middle of this brace. The glue seemed to be okay at this edge, but this seemed to have pulled up. The top was pulling away from the brace. So if anything's going to go wrong, it's going to be in the same manner. It's going to be trying to pull up at this brace and down on this brace. But I'm hoping, because I've put a good amount of glue in here, and I've put a little patch underneath the soundboard here, that should be mechanically okay, and in fact mechanically better than the braces here. These braces have not been touched. This is the original glue. So I'm hoping everything is okay. So that's just so that you know what the potential pitfalls could be of applying tension across this guitar. Right, let's go and string this up, but first I'm going to take a little bit off this bridge. I had thought this bridge was a bit on the high side, and it is a bit on the high side, but it's not as high as I first thought. The reading I'm getting, and I'm doing this for your benefit, I've already checked it, is about 2.75 millimeters on the bass side, which is not far off what we want. So having said that I was going to take some off the bridge, I'm going to go and string it up first and see what happens, because this neck is going to bend and the action is going to go up higher than this, and I will have to take some off the bridge. But I think at the moment there's no point in, I could take maybe a millimetre off the saddle, but yeah, I keep referring to the bridge, don't I? I mean saddle. But I think it's probably not much point just taking a millimetre off. I might as well get it strung up and get a good idea of where the action is before I start hacking at the bridge. So let's put some strings on it. Ooh. Here's the string, silver plated copper compound wound. Now, the silk is this bit here, and it's supposed to protect the bridge, because this is for your prestige old guitars. I'd always thought the silk was something to do with the winding, putting silk inside the windings, but I don't think that's the case. I imagined the silk was there to reduce the weight of the string and reduce the tension, or maybe increase the weight of the string, but how silk is going to increase the weight of the string, I don't know. But somehow to get the tension down, but I don't think that's the case. I think the silk is purely this part here, but they are a low tension string. Quite how that is achieved, maybe it's this silver plated copper compound business. What I hope is that's not too long for this. This is quite a low profile bridge, and let's hope that it stays well behind the bridge and doesn't come over the bridge. Let's see. I'm going to reach inside and hold the ball end against the... Oh yeah, that's fine. I like to make sure the ball end is well secured against the bridge plate, and that it holds firmly with the minimum of tension on the pin. Yeah, I might have to do some adjustment to the pins here, because that pin is now not wanting to go all the way down. The pin's sticking out proud at the bottom, but with the... I guess that's okay, but with the extra width of the string, the pin is quite high, but that's secure now. Now my preferred method of stringing, have a fair amount of loose string here through the peg, and that's 45 down, 45 degrees. Picked it up. You want to look slick on camera, and of course it never works that way, does it? So that's probably enough spare string. Flip it back over and bend it round like that. Now I could, at this point, cut the string off. And I'm thinking maybe I should do that. I'm just wondering whether I need a little bit of extra string. If we cut the string off now, it stops it flapping around and scratching the guitar. Yeah, let's do that. That's what I normally do. I just wondered whether with all the bridge adjustments I might need a little bit of extra string, but I don't see why. I can easily get this back on afterwards if I take it off completely, which probably won't be the case. But let's just cut it off there. How about that for commitment? I have a string winder, but it's difficult to do it without obscuring what I'm doing. And as we tension up, we clamp that string firmly in place. That is the first noise this guitar has made in decades. Let's do the other strings. I'm going to now put all of the strings on because I like to get in through the sound hole and just make sure that the string is completely secure against. What? That's ridiculous. That is so tight. The hole is barely big enough. I should have used a bigger drill. There will be some adjustment needed, I think. It's secure though, and in fact the pin's seated quite nicely. Again, very snug fit in the hole. By doing it this way, I can now tell that all of those strings are seated against the bridge plate and none of them are using the pin to hold them in. Well, the pin is holding them in, but what they're pulling against is the bridge plate, not the pin. It just gives me confidence. Right. Takes commitment to cut your string off before you've even tightened it, but I think that's enough slack. quite a lot of slack, but I think we need more slack on the treble strings. Make sure we've got a good bend. I ought to use the winder on this really, shouldn't I? Fit on the string. Just going to poke that end so that I'm not going over the string twice. That way it'll just sandwich it, and there's no chance of instability if it should slip off the end, if I just happen to have the end right under the string when it's tight, which isn't actually what's happened with the bass string, but if that doesn't make any sense, I'll show you in close up on some of the other strings. Given it quite a lot of slack here actually. Maybe a bit too much. This isn't meant to be a masterclass in how to string a guitar. But I think I do use a sound method. What I'm going to do here, I'm just going to make sure that that string end is going between the two windings, because if I tighten it from here, actually, if that was at tension there, I don't want this string sitting on top of the other winding. I want it sitting firmly against the tuning post. I have got to put a bit more tension in. Actually, you know what, I'm going to leave it because it's actually okay. But if we were coming round again, I'd make sure that that string end was not sitting underneath the string as it's going over the tuning post. But as it is at the moment, that's fine because the string is coming off the metal, not the string. Sounding rich. There's not much room to manoeuvre with this one. So I'm going to thread it down and then back up again. There we go. That would have been easier with the others. Right, give it a bit of slack. This one I'm going to wind that way, so I'm going to go round this way, which is the opposite way round to the others. I'm going to be winding that way. And I am going to cut it off fairly close to the string, which is a little bit risky, but there we go. Ah. It's come away. Let me try that again. I need to hook this through. Oh, I should have just kept going. Oops, I'm trying to keep this in view. And I'm taking my eye off the guitar. I should have should have crimped the string a bit better when I tightened it. Let's try that again. Have I? No, that's right. I wanted to do it that way. I didn't want to wind it in towards the middle. I thought for a minute I'd done that wrong, but I haven't. That's fine. It just keeps it from rubbing against the headstock. So now all the strings are going through nicely without touching the headstock. If I was to have wound that way, the chances are it would have collided with the headstock just here and rubbed. I can highly recommend Clear Tune for the iPhone. I really like this tuner. We're getting there. Well, nothing's creaked, which is a very good sign indeed. Ooh. It hasn't exploded. Well, that's it for now. I'm quite pleased it didn't explode. I've got an action of about 4mm, and that may actually increase a little bit as the neck beds in, but I've got some setup work to do, which I'm not going to do for a few days, so it'll be next week before that video is up. But yeah, look forward to getting this playing properly, and sorry about trolling you at the beginning. Bye! Right, if you're still with me, I'm going to explain why the square of 6% is 12%. Because it's a little mathematical trick that mathematicians use when estimating things. They discard the squares of small numbers. And we've got a small number here, and that small number is 0.06. If you consider what's happening, when you add 6% to something, what you end up with is 1.06 times the original amount. And if we consider that to be 1 plus 0.06, then it's easy to work out a rough approximation of that number squared. Because if you think back to school, it's the square of a plus b, which is a squared plus b squared plus 2ab. You're taking a product of 4 terms. So you're going a plus b, and it's a squared, b squared, and you've got an ab here, and you've got an ab here. Does that make sense? A squared plus b squared plus 2ab. There's 2 ways to get to the ab when you're doing the cross product. I hope you're with me on that. So when we're multiplying 1.06 by 1.06, we've got our A term is 1, our B term is 0.06, and we multiply them together. And we get 1 squared, which is 1, that's easy. We get 0.06 squared, which is 0.0036, which has become very small. It's about 1/3%, and we can pretty much ignore it. It's still there, but in terms of approximation, let's just ignore it. And then we've got this cross product term, which is 1 times 0.06, which is 0.06, doubled, which is 0.12. And that's why 6% squared is 12%. And there is an error term, and it is something you need to bear in mind, but it's quite small. So we end up with 12.4%, but it's near enough 12%. You can do the same when with that 12%. 12% squared is roughly 24%. In fact, the error is much bigger this time, because 0.12 squared is 0.0144, yeah, which is actually 1.5%, nearly 1.5%. So it's a little harder to ignore. So actually, when you square 12%, you get 26%. Okay, well, you get 25.5%, but we've already got the error from previous. So when you square 6% and then square it again, you get 26%. But if you're estimating, it's roughly 4 times. I hope that makes sense. Bye-bye.